Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cope Life podcast. I'm here back again, and today we're doing the mental health and emotional intelligence Ask Me Anything. I haven't done this in several months, so I'm really excited to be here and I'm ready to jump right in. When I was doing this previously, as well as for this episode, I received a lot of great questions, and I love to be able to come on here and serve you and answer your questions, and I'm going to be doing this weekly, so feel free to comment or send me a DM any questions that you might have about mental health or emotional intelligence. Again, this is Ask Me Anything. And if you'd like to just have a private one on one conversation, we can set that up too. Just let me know how I can help you. How can I serve you? And so I have four really good questions for this Friday evening, and I'm just going to jump right in because I'm really excited. They're really good questions. And the first one I have is someone asked, "What if I think I have depression?" And that's such a great question because there's so much information out there about depression. There's so much information about what depression is, what depression isn't, things that you can do about it. And I see lots of memes and lots of different things posted on social media, people with their quotes and people with their pictures and their sayings. And so many of them have truth to them, but they're merely just like basic foundational information. For example, there are some things that say that if you're depressed, you should get out more, you should exercise more, you should eat better. And those are all true statements. However, the question was asked, what if I think I have depression? Because sometimes it's hard to tell. So, what I want you to understand, first of all, is what depression is not. Depression is not sitting around boo-hooing, bawling your eyes out all the time. Some people have this image in their head of what depression is. And so when they know someone who says they may be depressed, there's often a lack of belief. There's often this idea of, how can you be sad? You don't look sad. You don't seem sad. Well, she was happy yesterday. He was happy at the club. We were happy when we went to the movies. And it's important that you understand that depression looks different in everybody. And the greatest evidence of that, beyond maybe some of your own personal circumstances, are celebrities. Most recently was the individual Twitch who took his own life, and that was very painful for a lot of people, and definitely felt throughout multiple communities because of how much he meant to a lot of people. And so many people would even look at his most recent videos, his TikToks or his IG reels, and they would say he looked so happy. And the reason for that is because depression does not require crying and bawling and boohooing all the time. Depression is really kind of a state of being. And when I say that, understand that experiencing depression is different than feeling depressed in the moment, because you can be depressed about something, you can experience depression about an event that comes and goes, and is very similar to a deep sadness, and that's normal and that's natural. And so one thing that depression is not a sad reaction to a specific event. You can feel depressed when you lose someone who's close to you. You can feel depressed about so many different things, maybe rejection, not getting the job that you wanted, not getting the date that you wanted, not getting the relationship that you wanted with that person, or maybe a breakup or a divorce. There's so many things that can make us feel sad and we can feel depressed, but that is not the same as dealing with being in a state of depression. And so, if you think you have depression, the first thing that you should do really is schedule an appointment with your PCM, your primary care manager. And the reason I say this is because there are so many depressive symptoms that may be caused by other things. For example, I've seen this, and I don't know exactly how true this specific number is, but I've seen that about 20% of women who are diagnosed with depression are actually dealing with thyroid issues. There may be other things going on in your body that are causing you to have depressive symptoms. And I'll tell you about myself. I'll tell you about my own self. What happened to me was I got a kidney transplant in March of 2020. And so when I got this kidney transplant, it impacted my emotions. And I didn't even know that was going to happen. But what I realized about myself was that I was very emotional. I was a lot quicker to come to tears than I had been previous to getting my kidney transplant. And so this uptick in emotion within me was physiological. So I was not suffering from depression. I was really experiencing a physiological symptom from my kidney transplant. So again, if you're experiencing or if you believe that you're depressed, get an appointment with your PCM to see what they can rule out. Because what you may do, if suppose you go straight to your therapist, you go straight to a counselor, and there are these diagnostic tests, and they're usually self report questionnaires. They'll ask you, have you been feeling this way lately? How long have you felt it? Have these specific activities been difficult for you? And you'll answer those questions, yes, and then your therapist can diagnose you with depression. But in reality, you're suffering from some other physiological issues, such as thyroid issues. And one reason why that's so important is because if your depressive symptoms are caused by thyroid issues and you're prescribed antidepressants, being that the cause of your depressive symptoms is your thyroid, it is physiological in that aspect, the antidepressants may not be effective. And so you may get to a situation where your therapist is actually trying to modify the dosage. Maybe the therapist thinks that the reason why the medication isn't working on your depression is because you need a stronger dose. And in reality, your thyroid is out of whack, and that's the medical treatment that you need. And then what may also happen is you may end up experiencing some of these side effects from antidepressants without actually getting any benefit from it. So, if you think you're experiencing depression, if you think you may have depression, talk to your PCM first and just say, "Hey, this is what I've been feeling lately. Are there any, physiological or medical issues that I may be experiencing that may cause these symptoms?" And maybe the PCM says, "We can run these tests, but at the same time, I'm still going to refer you to a therapist." And that really puts you in a position to kind of attack your emotional state in multiple ways. And so that's a good thing. That's positive, and that's something that you can definitely do to take care of yourself. And speaking of that, another question that I have that was posed to me is, how do I pick the right therapist? And I love this question because we often end up in situations, and not just when it comes to picking a counselor or a therapist, but often it's really anything, right? How do I pick the best restaurant, the best dentist, the best foot doctor? What do I look for to find the right professional for me? And so that's why I love this question, because we want to make informed decisions. Not all therapists are the same, right? And that's with any profession. Not all athletes are the same. Not all teachers are the same. Not all neurosurgeons are the same. And so I'm not even going to say that some are so much better than others. It's just that you may be able to relate or connect to some better than others. And so the first thing you really need to do is look at, what do you think is most important? And so, for example, if you are a young man, suppose you're 24, 25 years old, and you believe that you have depression and you want someone to talk to, and you're a person of color, how important is it to you that your therapist is a male, a man of color. And so that's something that you have to decide for yourself. If you are a black woman, how important is it to you that your therapist be a black woman? And part of that is based on you looking at what you're experiencing. You may be experiencing something that you believe is unique to your specific demographic. And so if you're a black woman and you think that what you're experiencing is unique to black women, then it makes sense to look for therapists who are black women. I mean, it just makes sense, right? And understand this is not any kind of discrimination or anything. This is you finding what's best for you. So you have to look at what's important to you. Do the demographics matter to you? What about age, for example? I'm 47 years old. And I got to be honest, age doesn't really matter to me. So if I were to go to a therapist, if I were to seek counseling, I really wouldn't care how old this person is. I do care more about the connection and the rapport that we have. Um, so I would think more about that as opposed to specific demographics like age or race or even gender. And when I say gender, one thing to keep in mind is that about 74% of mental health counselors and therapists, licensed clinical social workers, are women. About 74% of them are women. So if you are a man looking for a therapist, it may be more difficult to find a man to provide your therapy. So you may have to be open to a woman being your therapist. And you have to decide how important is it to you to stick to this boundary that you've come up with, or is it more important to get help for your mental health issues? And so there's the piece about how important are those things to you, but then there's also, in my opinion, the conversation that you should have with the therapist prior to just a consultation. And some of the questions you may have, you can actually look up on their profile if they have a website. For example, if you're looking for a therapist for your teenage son or daughter, you can look on their webpage or you can look on their profile. They might have a profile on certain other sites, such as I think Psychology Today has a section where they list therapist profiles. So there's different things like that. And then going through your health insurance, maybe they have a list of in-network providers, something like that. So you can go look on their profile and see if you have a teenage son or daughter who you want to get therapy, you can look on their profile and see, does that person specialize in adolescent mental health? And what you may find is a therapist who says they specialize in adolescent mental health, but the list of things they specialize in is 15 or 20 different things. And so maybe you feel uncomfortable with that. And so you have to really look at what is their specialty, what is it that they are focused on, what's their primary focus. For example, you might have someone who is really focused on gerontological mental health services, someone who is focused on the elderly. Okay. And this person is also an older person. So maybe you don't want to meet with that person. Maybe it's not a good idea to roll them out. But these are all things that you have to go through and then make that phone call, have that consultation. When it comes to therapy, there are really three levels within psychotherapy that you're going to go through. And the very first level that you're going to go through with your therapist or counselor is just building a rapport. Do we have a connection? Are we relatable? Am I even comfortable talking to you? And that's very important because if you are unable to establish a connection or a relationship, then it can be difficult to be more open, authentic, and vulnerable through the course of therapy. So you want to make sure that you have a good connection with your therapist. What is the rapport? Are you intimidated? Are you nervous? Are you guys able to laugh together? Do you feel comfortable with the questions that are being asked of you? So that's the first stage, is building rapport. The second stage is coaching. And so when I talk about the coaching, there's certain things that you have to be able to do. And I can tell you about this from even when I was working on my doctoral dissertation and I spoke to a lot of mental health therapists. My dissertation was about veterans with PTSD. And a lot of the, really all of the therapists that I spoke to during my research said that they had to coach their clients on specific skills prior to getting to the psychotherapy. So, for example, you have to be able to, in order to get some forms of therapy, like maybe prolonged exposure. Prolonged exposure is a therapeutic technique used for PTSD. And so we cannot we cannot engage in prolonged exposure therapy if the slightest exposure triggers your fight or flight. If it triggers a panic attack in you, then we cannot get right into the prolonged exposure therapy. You will need to be coached up on regulating your emotions, how to use your breathing, how to calm down, how to work through those thoughts and emotions, because you're going to have a lot of them going through something like prolonged exposure therapy. But you cannot really be successful in that stage, that coaching stage of therapy, if you don't get along with your therapist. And then once you get through those stages, that's when the real psychotherapy begins. And understand, for some people, those stages of building rapport and the coaching kind of thing is, it's 5 minutes. You immediately connect. They ask you some questions. Maybe they ask, do you have panic attacks? Do you have certain symptoms at certain times, anxiety attacks? How do you feel when this happens? And you answer those questions, they teach you some techniques, and you're good to go and you're ready to move forward. So there's a lot to consider when it comes to picking the right therapist, but this is what I'll say. Let me summarize all that, because I think I've been speaking on it for about 10 minutes now. The way to pick the right therapist is to, first of all, know what you're looking for, what's important to you in regards to demographics. Do I want a black man? Do I want a white man? Do I want an older woman? Do I want a younger woman? And you're looking at that not to discriminate, but you're looking at that in terms of relatability. Do I believe this person can relate to me? And quite often, to be honest, most therapists can. I'm sure that's really about your preference, because most therapists are able to relate to a wide, diverse group of people. So it's up to you how much you are concerned with that. And then the second thing I would say is to look at what they specialize in. Find a therapist that specializes in what you're dealing with, whether it's depression, anxiety, PTSD. What else are you dealing with? Are you dealing with chronic pain? Are you dealing with some form of addiction? Things like that, because you want to really treat the whole person, not just your thoughts, not just your emotions, but treat the whole person. So figure those things out, have a consultation with the therapist, and if you feel a good connection, a good rapport, then I would say go with that therapist. So I have two more questions that I've been asked that I think are very good questions. And before I move on, I just want to say that if you have any questions, any follow up questions to the things I just spoke on, which is, what if I think I have depression and how do I pick the right therapist? If you have questions or comments about that, you can just comment now and I could answer your question right now. Or you can send me a DM or comment later after I'm off, off of this live stream, and then I'll reach out to you for a one-on-one conversation. If you'd like that, just let me know. And so, moving on, the next question is, and this will kind of make me laugh a little bit, even though maybe it shouldn't, right? But is jealousy healthy in a relationship? And of course, the answer to that question is, it depends. Is jealousy healthy in a relationship? It depends. What are you jealous about? What is the person jealous about? And how do they express that jealousy? And, so we can go a couple different ways here. What is healthy jealousy in a relationship? Healthy jealousy might be something such as, if you're married and your wife, you're married, you have a wife, and your wife is going out to a company event. Maybe it's the company Christmas dinner, something like that. But this is an event where people are not bringing plus ones. People are not bringing their spouses, they're not bringing their significant others. and your wife puts something on that looks very beautiful. And so you're jealous in a sense of you can say to her, I'm jealous. You look so beautiful. I wish I could be with you tonight. You could say, but I hope you have a good time. Have fun. Call me if you need me. I'll be here, whatever. Right? That I think that's a sign of a healthy relationship. When I believe you to be so beautiful that I want to be with you when you are in this space or looking this way. I want to be there. I wish I didn't have to miss this. I don't believe that to be harmful in any way. But at the same time, jealousy can be harmful and it can be extreme and turn into violence. So you have to really look at essentially how you feel, how the other person's jealousy makes you feel. For example, if if you have a wife and your wife is dressed a very elegant dress for an evening with professionals, it's a networking event. Everyone there is a high level professional, and she looks very good. And you say you're jealous of how good she looks. Okay, that's fine. If you are then attempting to make her feel guilty, well, then that becomes negative energy, and that can be harmful. If she looks good and feels good and wants to go there and work her magic, a networking event, get these contacts, build her business or something like that, then you should be supportive and you should be encouraging. If you're concerned about other guys trying to get her number and trying to hit on her and get dates with her, the problem is not what she's wearing, the problem is your insecurity. If your wife is dressed a certain way and you demand that she changes, maybe the problem is your insecurity and your controlling or possessive behaviors. So you can see how you're now moving beyond jealousy to actually negatively impacting the relationship so that there are feelings of guilt or pressure, control. Nobody wants that. And quite often we will do things where we actually kind of feel a little insecure about it and we're looking for some support and encouragement. Does this look good on me? And I would want you to say yes. I do not want you to say to me, you shouldn't wear that, go change, I'm not letting you out the house. Then we're just setting up negative behaviors, and that could be the beginning of a cycle of abusive behavior. At one point in time, it's, I'm not going to let you out the house dressed like that. And then it spirals into, you're not leaving the house without my permission. You're not spending money without my permission. I'm going to check your phone. I'm going to check your social media. I'm going to check your bank account. That's controlling, and that can very well be emotionally abusive. And so jealousy to some degree can be healthy in a relationship, but if you are the one experiencing a jealous significant other, you need to check how it makes you feel. Do you feel guilty? Do you feel scared? Do you feel intimidated? Do you feel angry? And if the answer is yes, then the jealousy in your relationship is unhealthy. And it may get worse. If you accept that behavior towards you, it may possibly escalate. And then one day in the future, whether it's 3 weeks or 3 years, one day in the future, you sit around and you ask yourself, how did I get in this predicament? How did I get in this predicament where I'm not even allowed to go out with my friends looking good, spending money that I earned on my job? So you really have to be aware of how you feel. All right, that's your self-awareness. That's your emotional intelligence. When you say these things to me, it makes me feel intimidated or uncomfortable or frustrated. Have those conversations. And if you are unable to say to your significant other, I don't like it when you talk to me like that. If you're unable to say that's intimidating or that makes me feel guilty or that makes me feel bad, if you're unable to communicate those words, then you may have deeper issues in your relationship. You should always be able to express how you feel. And I'm not just talking about women speaking to men. This is in any relationship. Men should be able to tell their wives, I don't like when you talk to me like that. I feel disrespected. I feel hurt. I feel discouraged. And the same is true for any other kind of relationship, same sex marriages, any kind of relationship. You should be able to communicate how you feel. You should be able to say, that makes me uncomfortable. I don't like that. When you talk to me like that, you make me feel guilty. I'd rather you not do that. And then what happens is you can gauge the other person's reaction. If I say to you, I'd rather you not go out wearing that, and your response is, it makes me feel guilty when you say that. When, if you were to say to me, it makes me feel guilty when you say that, then my response would be, I didn't mean for you to feel guilty. I don't want you to have any negative emotions. I'm telling you how I feel, but the choice is yours. And and I'll be honest, I'm an open-minded guy, so I'm more of a do what you want is fine with me anyway. But still, the truth is, if someone is jealous in a relationship, it can be healthy, but you have to decide how it makes you feel. If their jealousy is expressed in a way that is frightening or brings about negative emotions in you, you need to address that immediately. You really do, because it can spiral into some form of abuse or violence. And it's a slow cycle. It's almost like evolutionary. It takes time. And then in 5, 10 years from now, you find yourself, really, you find yourself really depressed, really hurt, really anxious. And you can find yourself either feeling suicidal or being completely controlled. You can't leave the house. You can't do anything. They're checking your phone, checking your social media. They always need to know where you are. They put an app on your phone so that they can track your every move when you leave the house. You don't want to be in that situation. So if their jealousy makes you feel any negative emotion at all, say something. Say something. Because you deserve better than that. You deserve to be happy and respected and trusted in your relationships. And so, with that, I have one more question that I think is a great question that was asked of me. And this is why I love doing this. This is why I love serving you people and supporting you, because you can ask me these questions and I can answer them and really provide you some value. So, the next question is, can mental health disorders be genetic? And the answer is yes. Yes, mental health disorders can be genetic. That is not to say all mental health disorders are genetic. There has been some research on certain ones where they say yes, it is. And I'll give you an example. To me, the greatest example is schizophrenia, because schizophrenia affects about 1% of the overall population. However, if someone in your family has schizophrenia, then the chance of you getting it, developing schizophrenia at some point in time in your life is not 1%, it's 10%. And there is a genetic basis to that. And there's lots of research that has shown that. However, speaking of schizophrenia, we're very fortunate that we're in a time and age where there are lots of treatments for schizophrenia, and people are able to live happy, healthy, normal lives despite that diagnosis. There are other mental health disorders that may have a genetic basis, but they're also greatly impacted by your environment, by your culture, and your circumstances, right? And that's the whole nature versus nurture debate. Like depression, for example, if someone in your home suffers from depression, and the same is true with anxiety. If someone in your home suffers from depression or anxiety, you're more likely to get it. And when I say someone in your home, I mean like an older sibling or your parents. You're more likely to get it. But that doesn't mean it's genetic. It could be because that's what you're surrounded by. That's the atmosphere that you're around. And so if you have a parent who's depressed and then you experience depression and get a diagnosis of depression, that does not mean that it was passed down through the genes. There are lots of different things that can contribute to depression. and that includes your own personal circumstances. That includes, your relationships, your career goals, your body image, the decisions that you make. And in today's day and age, people's financial status also contributes to depression. When you tie your finances to how you value yourself, and so a lot of depression can be tied to our perception of ourselves, the way that we see ourselves, what value we place on ourselves. And so depression and anxiety may have a genetic basis, but the research that I've seen has neither has not conclusively stated that, but there's tons of research that says you're more likely to be depressed or anxious if you're surrounded by that. And it could be in your home or in your workplace. It really depends, but there's definitely an environmental factor to anxiety and depression. And I believe anxiety, well, I'll say this: depression and anxiety, of course, do have a physiological basis, right? There's some things that are out of our control. Um, so there's some things that are out of our control, such as maybe how quickly or the volume of cortisol or adrenaline or dopamine are released, right? And so um, maybe Chris and I go through the same thing. And Chris commented, he's my brother. Oh, man, I love you, Chris. I appreciate you being here supporting me. We may go through the same thing, but maybe because of his life experiences compared to mine, we will have different, amounts of dopamine release or serotonin release, and so there's a physiological basis for depression and anxiety that may not be genetic. But he makes a statement here. I believe we can rewire ourselves intentionally. Not easy, but doable for sure, in my experience. Um, that's 100% true. I had someone ask a question previously: can depression be cured? And the answer is yes, it can be cured. But one thing I want to point out about what Chris says is he says, I believe we can rewire ourselves intentionally. And I thank you so much for saying this, because I want to point out the power of each of those words. We can, right? The medicine isn't going to rewire us. Your therapist isn't going to rewire you. It's on you. Like, you have to take responsibility for your healing. You have to take responsibility for your mental health. And so you say intentionally. That word intentionally is very important. You're not going to half-ass some treatment protocol and wake up and say, I'm cured, I'm good, look at me, I'm good to go. It doesn't work that way. You have to put in the effort. You have to take responsibility for your mental health. So yes, depression can be cured, anxiety can be cured, OCD can be cured, PTSD, addictions, these things can be cured. You have to be intentional. You have to decide that you're going to do it. And then back to the question of, can mental health be genetic? Even if you did develop one of these, even if you did develop depression with some input of a genetic factor, you can still heal from that. You are not destined to be depressed. You're not destined to have a miserable life or to hate yourself or to judge yourself. As Chris says, you have to want it bad enough and stick with it for the long haul. And when you say you work at it every day, I appreciate you just putting your truth out there, Chris, and being vulnerable, because it's true. You have to work at it every day. It's almost like when we hear someone say that they've been sober for a certain number of days. I've been sober for 300 days. I haven't had a drink in 27 days or 5 years. There is nothing that says day number 852 is easier than day number 37. So every day you have to do the things that you need to get your mental state and mental health where you want it to be. So when it comes to depression, what can you do? And I'm not just talking about taking the medication. I'm talking about what else can you do to elevate your happiness. And you have to be able to elevate your self-awareness. And this is where the emotional intelligence comes in. What makes you happy? What motivates you? What are your triggers? What do you love to do? What are your values? And then, even if your mental health disorder has some genetic basis, you still position yourself intentionally to overcome that and be healed. And so, and then another comment by Chris, I think we have to find our unique way of channeling our mental energy for the greater good. Music, working out, and personal development are my go to daily. And that goes back to what I just said. Find out what you love. What are your values? What's important to you? And you say channeling your mental energy for the greater good. One of the most powerful, I would say the most powerful thing that you can do to elevate your happiness is to do things for other people. So when we say the greater good, it doesn't have to be you saving the world. If you've got a lot of money and you have a nice home, you have a lot of resources, that does not mean that you need to go and try to adopt, less fortunate kids. It can be something for the greater good, calling up your friends and having a conversation, inviting people to events like the movies or dinner or lunch. But what are your values? What do you love to do? What do you enjoy? What makes you feel like you come alive? I've had clients before where I've asked them, what do you love to do so much that it makes you come alive, really makes you happy? And they respond that they don't know. Answering this question, figuring out what you love, and then going and doing what you love are a part of intentionally working on your own mental health, working on your depression, working on your anxiety, whatever it is. And so focus on yourself, channel your energy in a way that elevates your mood, your mind, your life. Choose you, focus on you, choose happiness. And with that, I'm going to close out. Thank you very much. Chris, thank you so much for supporting me, man. It's such just great support, the things that you said. Thank you to everyone who watched and those who are listening. You can watch the replay. Um, this is on YouTube, my YouTube channel. Please subscribe if you're watching on YouTube now, and also anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Again, this is Cope Life Podcast, where we focus on living lives of kindness, optimism, positivity, and empathy. I love you. I appreciate you, and I will see you next time. Have a great week.